My name is George McCormick. I work in the graduate school here at North Carolina A&T State University. My official title is STAR Associate. STAR stands for Student Transition and Retention Associate within the graduate school. My responsibilities are to the School of Nanoscience and Nanoengineering, the School of Technology, and the School of Ag and Environmental Sciences. I basically handle students who are interested in graduate school from prospect to applicant to degree clearance. So I handle from beginning to the end a student who's coming to graduate school, also answering questions, and the main recruiter within the graduate school.
Well, George, my name is Devaney. Thank you for meeting with us today, and I just have a few questions I want to ask.
Sure.
So do you feel that students who come to you with future plans for graduate school are less likely to succeed if they came from a community college?
No, I think that students, each pathway is different. Even though you started at community college, there are several factors you have to look at why a person started at community college. Mm-hmm. It could be finances, it could be not academically prepared but needing some more groundwork. But basically by the time they get to me in a graduate school, I'm not necessarily looking at what they did in community college, because some people will take community college level courses while they're doing undergraduate work. So for me, I don't think they're less prepared. I just think it gives them more, makes them better prepared in some fashions when they get to me in graduate school.
Awesome. Do students with community college background leave the program more often than students who attended a four-year university?
That's hard to say because from what I do, and I don't think anyone's really tracking that information right now. So to be fair to answer that question, I would have to say that there's not a correct answer for it just yet.
Okay. And in your experience, do community college transfer students tend to be more or less likely driven than four-year students?
It depends. And again, most students that I will see when they get to me, coming from a community college, will be, I would call the adult learner. Mm-hmm. And they may have been out of high school for some time and they went to the community college, then came to undergrad, got a degree. And so I would say in a sense, yes, some of them will be probably better prepared, and I can look at a transcript and I can see, well, some may have struggled at the community college, but by the time they get to me, they're more focused and they know what they want to do.
Okay. Because the stigma with it is the four-year students are more so at the university for the student activities versus the academics. And so in the research studies and the articles that are being published, they're looking at community college students coming to the university are more focused and more so want the academic part of it more so than the college experience or the student activities.
Right.
So they're more likely to succeed in graduate school, and they have a higher retention than the four-year students. Because they kind of get burnt out or aren't really fully prepared because they've been a little distracted by everything else that the university has to offer.
I would say that most times when a student has had their community college experience, from what I've seen, and I'm not giving you factual data,
right?
But in the applicants and the communications I have when I'm out recruiting or dealing with students on the phone, and when I get transcripts, those students to me are the ones who are going to be better prepared to exceed because they've had some additional educational to come along with just a student who's coming right out of high school straight into undergrad. And most students, by the time they come out of undergrad, I find that they really don't know why they need to go to graduate school, what's the purpose of graduate school. A person who's got community college experience, it's like they're on a pathway and they understand that I started at community college, I've got to a four-year degree, and now the end game is probably for me a terminal degree. So for them, I think they're more engaged and prepared, ready for graduate school.
As a four-year student who didn't do community
That
college
is correct.
first, I totally agree with you.
That's correct.
If a community college transfer student has been advised and tracked properly, do you expect them to perform at the same level you would that four-year student who came straight from high school?
I think if they've been prepared, they're more disciplined probably. Because again, coming out of high school into college, that's a big transition. But if you go to community college, so you're already in that setting where you somewhat are working a little bit more independent than you would in a high school setting. So leaving a community college, now coming into a four-year school, because typically you're only going to have 2 more years to do to get a full bachelor's degree. And that's the other unique thing about starting a community college. you transition coming to a school like A&T, you bring a minimum of 64 hours with you. So if you got an associate's degree, you come into here, you're really just doing your junior and senior. And so you know that going in, I only have 2 years left, and then with that, you're better prepared, I believe, academically, independently, socially. And so I think you will be the one who will be better prepared to transition coming into graduate school in some instances.
Do community college transfer students require more overall assisting and advising to be successful?
No. You got to remember, they've already had 2 years of experience being advised. So for them, it's just a different academy or academic setting. So they understand the process of seeing an advisor. They understand the process of registering classes. There's just a different arena as far as the university is concerned of how they may go about registering. And most universities are somewhat the same, where it's online to do your registration. So they have that kind of process down, but each school may be different on how that looks during the registration. But they have an upper leg on a student who's coming straight out of high school, where they sat down with their family and their guidance counselor and said, these are the classes I want to take, and a schedule is printed for them. You're coming from a community college, you're used to sitting down with an academic person who's actually telling you, these are the courses you need to take to finish this degree. So by the time they get to the 4-year school, they have 2 years under their belt, they understand someone's going to sit down with me and give me some type of curriculum that says these are the remaining 64 hours, typically that's what they need to finish that 4-year degree. And by the time they get to graduate school, it's a little different because, again, you're independent, but you're still being advised.
What about the advising that goes beyond the academics, the other support where the advisor has to, I guess, advise them into their personal lives and social lives outside of the academic for them to be successful academically? Do you think that the community college students require more assistance in that area, or the 4-year students?
I think the community college student would need less because typically they're either on some kind of diploma track, certificate track, leaving there, and so they understand if they want to be more marketable or gain more employment or more income, they've already been advised this is what it's going to take to get there. What a person coming straight out of undergrad, they just basically, I went to college, I've taken classes, unless that's a student who's very independent and very focused, they don't know how to ask those questions to the advisor or to the support services to say this is what I need, because again, you got to remember, 4 years, then you get to your senior years, like, okay, I'm ready to graduate, but it's not, okay, what do I do with my diploma? I know I want a job. A person with a community college degree says, I'm building upon to make myself more marketable, and they understand what the end game will be. And so I still say, when the way you're framing a lot of your questions, I think that the community college student in some facet will be better prepared, will be able to work more independent, and will be able to get to the end game faster than the student who's coming straight out of high school into a 4-year institution and then thinking about what do I want to do with graduate school or why I need to go to graduate school. So in what I do, if I meet a student, I'm talking to a student, I try to frame that question for them to help them understand that it's fine that you have a degree in biology, but what are you going to do with a degree in biology?
Absolutely.
A student with a social degree, social arts and science and something coming out of community college understands, I'm going to A&T or going to a 4-year school, finish that bachelor's degree in biology, but the end game is I'm already looking at pharmacy school. I'm looking at med school down the road or something else. So they have an upper leg, even though they started at a smaller institution, smaller support, and maybe not the bands and the athletics and all those other things, but it's more academic focused, I believe, at the community college, because at a 4-year school you have so much to offer the student that some students, unless they've been driven when they leave high school to understand 4 years professional school or graduate school, a lot of them is like in their senior year.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to go to the workforce. I think I want to go to graduate school. What do you have to offer? Hadn't done their due diligence, hadn't done their homework to understand what it's going to take to get there. And for me, as I said, recruiter, working with prospect students, applicants, clearing for graduation, I see all of it now. So when I'm talking to a student, whether they're coming out of community college, they kind of know how to move forward. But typically when I'm running to students who are sophomore, I start trying to shape that conversation with them, help them understand what it's going to take to get to graduate school, why it's important to go to graduate school. And there is a difference, just going to get a master's versus going to a professional school, which is law, which is med school, which is going to seminary, going to professional school, because you're going to get your master's or Jewish doctorate, but that's kind of really it when you finish,
Right.
versus going on to get the master's, art, science, fine arts, and then on to get a PhD or EDD.
Okay. So dwindling down to the last couple of questions, and I think you might be able to answer these pretty easy because of your answers to the other ones. Does the community college transfer student receive the same level of inherent respect extended to a four-year university student at program end?
They do, because you really don't know which one is the difference between the community college and the four-year student, unless they kind of disclose that to you. Now, the advisor would know, because they're looking at a student's transferable hours.
Right.
So they know I'm not sitting here talking to a true freshman. This person has some collegiate experience, so they should understand how this should work. Whereas you're sitting there with a student who's a freshman, not a sophomore, and depending on the department, how the advisement work, you may have an advisor who, just like I said, that's my duties, to advise you. I teach classes. Whereas you got someone at community college, they're going to have a different conversation with their advisor, because they're pushing the advisor to make sure, am I on track to do this?
Right.
Am I doing this to get to there? So the community college student should have a different conversation, in my view, than just a traditional undergraduate student.
Now, do you feel, I guess with that question, in terms of them having the equal level of respect, if you are or know of business owners or anyone who's looking to hire this person and transcripts are required in that, such as Gifford County Schools, they require a transcript for certain positions, do you think it makes a difference when they say, okay, this student just went to A&T for 4 years, this student went to GCCC first, then went to A&T, so do you think they're going to get the same level of respect when looking at that? I
don't think the employer is looking at that, because the employer is looking for, of course, a transcript that shows the students academically taking the right kind of courses to be prepared for this particular job or program. Really, it's up to the student to understand what the employer is looking for and be able to sell them academically, I'm prepared to take on this job. So a person who's going to community college has the same capacity, because again, they started out here, did 2 years, came over here, and this person, by the time they got to a junior, so they're right with each other, and they should finish together, because you're bringing 64 by the time you get to 64, so you finish together. The only thing that I would say different is for the employers to, maybe inquire some questions going back, why they start out at community colleges, or, being able to say, what has that transition been for you to community college to a four-year school, where a person coming straight out of high school, that's all they've known. This person, non-traditional student, may have family, may have some other obligations where they can speak on how to take on more and multiple responsibilities by being a community college student. Whereas the employer sitting there now says, this is someone I'm probably not going to have to hold hands with to train. This is probably someone who's going to be committed to the end, who's probably going to be here for a while. Four-year student may be the one who's looking, not saying the right things, and say, well, this person, yes, I have to train, but they're probably going to be here within transition. Probably not be here long, probably looking for something else, but they're looking for employment right now. So I think, in a sense, it's also up to the student to sell themselves to the employer of why you need me to be in your company, and let the employer then say, I need you to be in my company. Because I always tell students, at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. In the workforce, it's about the bottom. They're looking for, who can I bring in that will maintain my bottom line as far as revenue, but at the same time, whatever service and products I'm doing, they're educated enough to understand how to continue to produce or bring value added to my company or to this job that's going to keep the bottom line going forward.
So the overall stigma that if you went to community college first and I didn't, but we both have the same degree, neither one of us is better, because the overall stigma in the research papers and in the text, it's always comparing that stigma of saying that student that went just those straight 4 years is more appeasing. Or
I like to look at it this way. I tell students, you come to A&T, you get a bachelor's in biology, you get a 4.0. You go to Duke, Chapel Hill, and no respect to any of these schools, you can go to Harvard or Columbia and get a BS degree in biology. What's the difference? It's the papers printed on.
right.
If you have done the due diligence in the academic arena, getting mentors to help you be better prepared, it's the same degree on a piece of paper sitting there talking to the employer. One would have probably advised you better on what companies look for and how to prepare yourself when you're sitting there, versus someone who has just a degree and that's all they know. I got a 4.0 and I should be input. It's not about that, because there's so many different other things you just may not get at one school that you'll get another. Now I'll bring it back to A&T. A&T is one of the few institutions that I know that, even though it has a rich history, but it has a connection where it does try to prepare those students to go out in what we call the global world, the global economy. Where a few years back, we had chancellors telling students in their freshman orientation, how many of you have passports? If not, you need to get your passports. Why? Because they're preparing them so when you leave here as an engineer, your job as an engineer may not be in the United States. It may be in China. It may be in Africa. It may be in a third world country. But we're preparing you just like the same person who's at Harvard who has connections, or the Columbias, or the Chapel Hills, or the States, whereas the paper alone, the employer may get excited because they went to Chapel Hill, but this student saying, I have the same credentials and this is why you need me. So coming back to the question of the community college student, he's got a little bit more in his bag of tricks, I believe, or her bag of tricks, to help them to understand. I think at the end of the day, I'm more well prepared than a person who just got a 4-year degree. Even if that student left the 4-year school to go back to the community college through the academic reasons to come back, they're still better prepared because now they understand what it's going to take to succeed. So the stigma of the community college, and I think that went away probably in the late 80s, because it was looked at, you went to a community college for a trade school just to go right into the workforce.
Right.
Whereas now, the degrees and the programs that are coming out of the community college are preparing people just as those who now have 4-year degrees. And the difference is you have an AS or AA versus a BS or BA, but academically they're almost coming out equivalent, 2-year versus the 4-year. But you come to this 4-year school to get the rest of some things you wouldn't get at a community college. So, but I think the dialogue now is much different in the new millennium of a person coming out of a community college is more prepared. I hope what does not happen though in my lifetime, that the 4 institution becomes irrelevant and the community college is more relevant.
And the thing with that is, now that you say that stigma went out in the 80s that the degree was better or there was a difference in it, the stigma now is the professors aren't as educated, or the university professors are more research-based, so they're not really paying attention to their advising or to their teaching because all of that comes secondary to the research. So now they're saying the community college students, and some are saying the community college students are getting a better education because their professors are more just focused on the academics, and others are saying, well, these professors have PhDs and these professors have all this research knowledge, so their students are more knowledgeable than the community college students.
I think it also has to do with, and all schools are challenged with this, I think it comes from your provost, your deans, all the way down to making sure that your professors they have balance. And I know all institutions are strapped now with funding and so many things, so you have professors doing multiple things, advising and required to do research and do journals and to do grants. So when it comes to advising a student, that's like low on the priority. This student's going to get some advice, but they're not going to get the advisement they probably need. So a lot of institutions have gone to now start looking at what's called advisement centers, where it frees the professor up to really teach, do research, and the things that you've required him to do as a tenured faculty. And then at the academic center or the advisement center do the advisement piece. Whereas, like I said, then that professor's freed up. But I think it all hinges on from top down, being able to see that. So at the end of the day, the student doesn't fall to the cracks and the student is still properly advised and prepared and be able to get with mentors to be able to do quality research. Because most institutions that have the higher accreditations are research institutions. And when you look at it, they're brand who they are. If they have research, high intense research behind, then that's typically what they're supposed to be doing. Even though you have your bachelor's degrees, but they have masters and PhDs and EDDs where those programs should be looked at upon as institutions and programs that produce a lot of research. And that's why you don't have it at the community college, because again, you're just getting the basics. When you get to the 4-year schools and in graduate school, it's a little bit more intense with that research focus. There are not too many institutions that are not world renowned if they're not research focused. And that's what draws the best professors. When they know they can go into the academy or go to the institution and they're going to be respected in their areas of expertise, but they're able to still continue to do research. When you're just put in a classroom just to teach, you know, and I don't have a PhD, but again, I work with a lot of people and I'm working at grad school. That's not the focus of why they got a PhD. They didn't just get a PhD so they can get to teach. You went got that terminal degree because you want to, one, say, I want to add to the academy, and that's getting your PhD. But while you're in there, you continue to do research to change what's in the academy.
Absolutely.
So
do you think that community college transfer students display an affinity for campus activities such as SGA or homecoming events, or do they routinely ignore them to focus on their actual education?
I don't have the answer to that one, and I think it comes with the institution, making the student feel that they're just as important as the one who's straight out of high school came. It's just like in the graduate school, you come to get your graduate degree. You may be a professional student, you may be a mom or dad who, all you need to do is just come and get your degree. You don't have time for all those things, but you still need to have those other, not assets, but other social programming entities for them. So they can say they had a full, well-rounded experience at that institution.
Absolutely.
I did mine, and most of us like this, I did my undergrad here at A&T, so I got the full undergrad A&T experience. Well, I left here with the seminary, which was in Shaw. Well, Shaw University has other undergrad programs, but I was in the seminary, so I didn't really necessarily connect with those other programs, but if I wanted to, they were there for me. If I wanted to go to football games, I wanted to be, matter of fact, I was in Student Government Association. I was the treasurer in graduate school for my when I was in seminary. So I experienced some of those things, and we have that here at A&T. And so we want students to have the full-fledged experience. You may not have started out undergrad here, but when you leave here, we want you to be just like a student who was an undergrad student, to get the full, and because you paid in your fees.
Yeah. And
so some things you pay for are required to, so you might as well be exposed to it. And now if you choose not to be exposed to it, that's on you as a student, but it should be there for the student.
And lastly, as a parent who has every intention of seeing your child graduate from university with a degree someday, would you be comfortable with them securing their first 2 years of higher education at a community college versus going straight to the university?
I think it depends on the student. If the parent really knows their child and know that that child is not truly prepared to go to a 4-year school and to be away from home, because that's a big transition, I wouldn't encourage that child, or I wouldn't force that child to go just because you need to go to a 4-year school, because what you're doing, you're setting them up for failure. Some children today, and just not today, but in past, I think parents thought that the child should just go to a 4-year school, get the degree, and go on with life, whereas socially, they were not socially prepared. They could have stayed home or stayed within the community, went to the community college, got it down, whereas what it looks like to not be in high school, being around adults, somebody else telling you to do this and that, and then when they left there, they were ready. So it's not, and I always used to tell students when I used to work in undergrad, you're not left behind. It's just that if you can't get into a 4-year school, go ahead and go to your 2-year school, because you're going to bring all that coursework with you when you're in the UNC system, as long as you made, C's or better. So you bring that with you. So even though you have a friend who graduates with you in 2015 and you didn't have the grades, or you weren't really prepared to go to a school like A&T, go to the community college in your area, because when you get your 64 hours, you've got your associate's degree, you come in, you've already got 1 degree, but you're right there with your friends who graduated you 2 years ago. So you actually now can finish your bachelor's together. But again, this student is going to come prepared to stay on task. They already know I'm only 2 years in. And I got 2 years to go, so I'm going to keep going. This person may still be floundering, and you've caught up with them, and you can actually almost graduate before them. Right. But at least you have that first degree, which is the associate degree.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate all your input and taking the time to interview with me today.
No problem.
It's a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, man.